He was born in Avondale in County Wicklow to a landowning family, but he was very concerned about tenants' rights as he grew up. He saw what was going on his own land, and he became an MP for Meath. And he decided, again, Daniel O'Connell kind of took on the mantle of Daniel O'Connell. He was a year old when Daniel O'Connell died, so he decided to take on the kind of peaceful route, if you like, the political route. So he became elected to the British Parliament, and he set up the Irish Parliamentary Party. And they were fighting for Home Rule and tenants' rights. He was a co-founder of the Irish Land League with Michael Davitt. They were looking for fair rent, fixity of tenure and free sale. But he also, I say, his Irish Parliamentary was kind of also known as the Home Rule Party. So he introduced the whip system, which we're all familiar with the whip system nowadays. But he was the first to introduce a system whereby political parties, they were whipped into shape, they all had to vote as they were told. So by so doing, he had a block within Parliament. It's interesting what's happening over in England today with the elections. But Gladstone didn't have an overall majority at the time, the Liberals. So he needed coalition partners, if you like. It wasn't called a coalition then, they were allies. So he knew he could rely on the Irish Parliamentary Party to get bills passed. And also, Parnell was able to use that influence to get Gladstone to change things for Ireland. And that's what he was working for. He did introduce one Home Rule bill in the Commons, but unfortunately it was defeated before he even got to the Lords. Eventually Home Rule was introduced and put on the statute books in 1914. It was never enacted because the First World War broke out, and all things then, as they say, changed. So, I say he was a great. He kind of got the tenants to stand up on their own 2 feet, fight for justice. So anyway, everything was going very well. The Irish Parliamentary Party was doing great, except Parnell was involved in a terrible scandal. It was awful at the time. At the time, he had the support of both the established church and the Catholic Church. But the scandal was he was having a relationship with a married woman called Catherine O'Shea. Now her marriage had broken up, but she was still officially married to William O'Shea. Now William O'Shea wouldn't divorce her because her auntie was very wealthy and he was hoping to get his hands on the money, but they wouldn't divorce her. So the auntie, being very smart, she decided to put the money into a trust. So he knew then he would get his hands on the money, so he would have to divorce her now. But unfortunately, I'd get a spite. Now everybody in London, political circles, knew he had this relationship with Catherine O'Shea, but suddenly now he was named in the divorce proceedings and it was all over the paper. It was a huge scandal. Now in those days, divorce was just a no-no. It was a huge scandal, especially for a politician. So immediately the churches withdrew their support of him, and so did Gladstone, because Gladstone said you have to stand down as leader of the party because people won't vote for us and we won't get the bills through. But he said, no, I'm not going to stand down as leader. He said, political parties should be independent of the church and of Gladstone. I wish that was the case. Say no more. But anyway, he decided, so it caused a huge split in the parliamentary party. So his supporters went with him. Then there was what was called the anti-Parnellites who were against him. Now, he went into failing health. He kept trying to get more people elected. They lost some of their seats. And he was going out on the hustings and all kind of weather like this. And he eventually, I think he caught pneumonia. But he went to Catherine O'Shea's divorce came through, he married her. But 5 months after they got married, at the age of 45, he died in her arms in Brighton. That's where they lived, in Brighton. So, very sad. They were only married for 5 months. They had 3 children together. But anyway, he died. I did say you had a relationship. Yeah, you were. Apparently none of those children survived. There's no link now. All that Parnell family have died out. There's no descendants. Sad. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have said it. Anyway, I say he died, and his supporters wanted to bring him back here and have him buried here. So they came to Glasnevin Cemetary and said, look, they hadn't got too much money by now because the party had been split. They said, listen, we want to bring Parnell back. We want to give him a good send-off, but we haven't got a huge amount of money. And they got a nice place, like somewhere within the sight of Daniel O'Connell. They said, oh, we have a great place. We have this lovely mound here, just across the chapel from Daniel O'Connell. So they said, we'll take it. They bought it. Now, why do you think they got it so cheap? Huh? No. That was actually the cholera pit. It is the cholera pit. There are 11,000 souls buried in there. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. But 11,000, so there was a cholera epidemic in Dublin in 1849, and they were all buried in this pit. So anyway, they knew that, and another reason why they took it as well, they said, well, the anti-Parnellites are not going to interfere with Parnell's grave if they know the cholera pit in there. And I don't think he minded, because he was always for the ordinary people. And then, like, you're dead, you're dead. You know, when you're dead. So they built up the mound to make it look more regal. He was called the uncrowned King of Ireland. Daniel O'Connell was called King Dan. So there it is, there's 8 tons of Wicklow granite sitting on top, no dates, no nothing. I think it's very, it says everything, doesn't it? It's simple, it's dignified, I think it's lovely. Yeah. Now the day of his funeral, I'll briefly tell you about that. So he died on the 6th of October. On the 11th of October, his body was brought back through Kingstown, which is now Dunleary. It was brought into the city. It was put on view and lay in state in the City Hall for a while. Then the cortege started and was winding its way through Dublin. Now 300,000 people turned up at the funeral, can you imagine? And they had no way of controlling crowds then. They had no crash barriers, or no police on horses, or no fellas like at the golf saying silence please, or anything like that. None of that. So there was an awful push, and at one stage the police battened charged the crowd to keep them back. They all wanted to see their uncrowned king, because they all loved him so much, despite the Catholic Church. They all loved Charles Stewart Parnell. So they were expecting the funeral cortege to arrive here at 12 o'clock, but it didn't arrive until 6 o'clock in the evening. So it was freezing cold, it was pitch dark. So they had terrible trouble getting the coffin in through the gate. And the 2 ministers who were doing the service, they were getting worried because of a lot of pushing and everything. So eventually they got the coffin in, and the 2 lads said, listen, let's get this over with quickly. You know, they wanted people to despair. So the coffin, they did the prayers, and the coffin was going down into the grave, and suddenly a streak of light came all the way across there. Very dramatic. It's like, I know you don't believe me, but it is actually true. It was recorded by Maud Gunn in her diaries. She was here at the funeral, and she described at the exact time this streak of light. And of course it was pitch dark. Everybody was must have been very dramatic. They didn't know what it was, but years and years later they checked with Dunsink Observatory, which is just up the road, and at exactly that time, on that date, a meteor hit Earth. So that was the streak. I think it was a sign from God. Anyway. So that was Daniel O'Connell, but there were so many people here, they all wanted to be able to tell their neighbours and their friends that they were here. So they took all the ivy off the walls and off the trees, and they put it in their lapels. So his date of death became known as Ivy Day. And for years it was celebrated, it was even more important than St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, because he was very beloved, and that's why there are ivies engraved here on the railings. That's Charles Stewart Parnell, and those trees were sent over. His mother was from a very wealthy American family, that's the Stewart part, and followers of him and supporters of him sent over those trees. They're American redwoods, and there's a sequoia tree over there, so that's beautiful, isn't it? It's very peaceful, I think.